Hey everybody, what's up? Welcome to another video of Kneading with Franco and welcome back to my Sourdough Masterclass. Today we are at day 2 of the creation of our stiff sourdough starter. So yesterday we created a contaminated water. What do I mean by contaminated water? Well, it was contaminated by the skin of an apple, which was infused in this clean container for 24 hours at 24 degrees Celsius. The skin of an apple, when it fermented for 24 hours at 24 degrees Celsius or 75 Fahrenheit, it released a lot of sugars in the water and made this contaminated water a tad acid, and we need that acidity in the water to trigger the spontaneous fermentation of our good bacteria to create our sourdough. Don't get me wrong, you don't need a bait, because this is what we created yesterday. This is a bait which creates some fertile ground for our sourdough to get started and to speed up a little bit the fermentation. But the acidity that was created by the apple skin, it would have been created anyway by just the action of the fermentation of the water with the flour. We just speeded up the process a little bit. Today we're going to be using wholemeal rye flour, organic. And now it's important that it is organic, as I mentioned in my first video yesterday. It's important for it to be organic because we want the flour to be less treated as possible, because we won't want it to contain any extra substances. And also, as I said yesterday, it's important to use a wholemeal flour, and it's best again if it is organic. So you're 100% sure that it has not been treated or processed in any way and doesn't contain any extra substances. You also want a wholemeal flour because you want the action of the bacteria to be faster. So the wholemeal flour is much better when you are first getting started with your sourdough, because the action of the fermentation is much faster compared to a more refined flour. As a step 2 today of our creation of the sourdough starter, we're gonna make a poolish. Yes, a poolish, because that's what it is. I call it a poolish because we are going to use the same amount of flour and the same amount of fermented water, the contaminated water that we created yesterday. And for the purpose of this video, and to make also the calculations a little bit simpler for you, I'm gonna mix 100 grams of wholemeal rye flour organic and 100 grams of contaminated water. As I said yesterday in the video, if you can't find the wholemeal rye flour, then try to find the wholemeal rye flour which is not organic. If you can't find the wholemeal rye flour at all, I would just recommend to stick to a wholemeal flour. So you can just a regular wholemeal flour that you can find easily in any supermarket. Again, it's best if it is organic, but if you can't find it, it's just as fine. So now, to get started, we are going to have another small clean container. This is, I cannot stress this enough. It's very important when you are dealing with sourdough that all the containers and all the tools that you're using, they have to be 100% clean. And it's essential not to clean them with soapy water. So don't use any kind of soap, don't use any detergent. As you can see here, I also prepared a colander, which is useful so we don't accidentally drop the skin of the apple inside the container. Let's remove the cling film that I applied yesterday from our contaminated water. Let's just put the colander back in place. Let's remove the cling film, just like that. And now let's drop 100 grams of contaminated water inside of this other clean container. 84, 90, that's it, 103. Now, do not worry if you exceed the 100 grams, like it happened in this case to me. by a tiny bit. It could be 105, it could be 110. It doesn't really matter. And let me tell you why. It doesn't really matter because we are going to add the same amount of flour anyway. So make sure to add the exact same amount of wholemeal rye flour or whatever other type of wholemeal flour you have to create the polish. So remove the colander as I did, and let's start weighing 100 grams of rye flour. Let's use a spoon for that. You can smell the rye flour. It has an amazing smell. So let me move the camera a little bit so you can see everything a little bit better. So let's just use a spoon to take 100 grams of rye flour, and let's put it inside here. So it's 21. I need to reach 103 because I made it by mistake a tiny bit more. So it's going to add 68, 85, almost there, 100, 101, 102, and that's it, 103. Now we have to mix the compound, and I suggest to use a fork because the more you mix, the more you realize that this compound is a bit stiff. It has a tough texture, so make sure to try out every piece of water. Make sure that the flour absorbs all the water. I could have used a bigger container, but that's fine anyway. So the more you mix, as you can see, the more you'll find the tough texture of this compound, a stiff consistency, and this is due to the use of a wholemeal flour, which absorbs much more water. Keep on mixing. Just because I don't want to hide anything from you, I just decided to move everything inside a bigger container. So it's a little bit easier for me to mix, and I can show you the whole process so you don't skip anything and you don't miss anything of what I'm doing. So let's keep on mixing everything just like that. You see how much easier it is to mix within this bigger container. That's it. Take a look at the consistency of this compound. It's really tough. It feels and it looks like almost a cream. Let's keep on mixing it. And by the way, you will notice at that stage that the compound has an amazing smell, and this is due to two factors. It's a mix between the skin of the apple, which was super nice smell, and the amazing smell of the rye flour too. So at this stage, it has an amazing smell. It's not going to be exactly the same in the next 48 hours, but unfortunately this is part of the process, and this is part of the fermentation too. So mix thoroughly the water and the flour until you make a polish. It needs to be almost like a cream, and there is no more dry flour hanging around. It has to be absorbed quite well. We don't need to have any more flour stuck to the inside of this new container where we moved our compound into. Okay, that's it. Now, our polish, as you can see, is ready. It's nice and ready. And now, what we have to do is use a spoon I'm going to use this teaspoon in this case. When your polish is ready, use a spoon to transfer the compound into the same container that we used yesterday to make the contaminated water. Obviously, before doing so, let's remove the skin of the apple and the leftover water without cleaning the container. Yes, let me repeat this. You don't have to clean the container. If you think that it's a little bit dirty and you want to remove something, just use warm water. But at this stage, I'm going to just empty the inside of the container. So I'm going to remove the excess of the water that it's still here, and I'm going to remove the apple skin, and that's it. As I said, I removed the excess of apple skin and the excess of water that was contained still in this container, and now I just want to dry it using just some kitchen paper. So again, I did not clean this, but let's make sure it's all nice and dry. And then let's start moving our polish make sure to use another spoon to facilitate the process of removing this polish, which is obviously quite sticky and it has the consistency of a cream. From there, let's remove it all from this other container and let's move it to the original container. We are only going to use this container here from now on. That's it. It's all nice and moved in here. So when you moved the polish inside of the container, when you finished, start leveling down by pushing the compound to the bottom of the container. And I'll explain why I want to do this in a bit. Let's push it down and level it as much as possible using the spoon. So it's all nice and pushed down. That's great. That's perfect. So the reason why you want to do this by pushing it to the bottom of the container, so when this is leveled, we can apply a plastic rubber band to trace the level of rising. So let me take a plastic rubber band. I'm going to apply the rubber band just here. So we can trace the level of the fermentation. If you don't have a rubber band, that's absolutely fine, because instead of a rubber band, you can use a marker and a black one, and you can apply like a sign here so it's visible, so you can track the level of the fermentation. Now, what we have to do now is we have to close the container, we have to seal it, and basically we need to do the same thing that we did yesterday for the contaminated water. We don't have to seal it tightly, so we are going to do exactly the same technique that we did yesterday. You can either use a bandage if you have it. If you don't have a bandage, you can use some cling film, making sure to apply some holes. Let's apply the cling film on top of it. There you go, just like that. And let's use a fork to apply some holes in here. That's it. So the reason why you want to apply the holes, and you have to be general with the holes, is that so the compound can breathe and the good bacteria of your kitchen inside your home can contaminate this compound. We want them to contaminate this compound to make it ferment. We applied the rubber band to track the level of the fermentation, as you can see from here. and you want to leave this compound to ferment in a warm place. So as I said yesterday, there are different ways to make sure that the temperature that you apply, which I recommend is going to be 24 degrees Celsius or 75 Fahrenheit. There are different ways how you can reach this. So you can either use your home oven with the light on, so it's going to be switched off, but just with the light on. And if you use that, obviously the temperature is going to reach around 26, 28 degrees. To keep it down a little bit, you can use a wooden spoon. You can put the wooden spoon to create some sort of crevice between the opening of the door. So if you put the wooden spoon right there, you're not going to allow the door of the oven to be completely sealed, and in that way you can allow some air to go within your oven, and you can keep the temperature around 23, 24 degrees Celsius. So important now, this compound, it has to be fermenting at 24 degrees Celsius or 75 Fahrenheit for 48, maximum 72 hours. We should notice in 48, maximum 72 hours, we can notice a fermentation. We should notice some sign of fermentation. And you can increase, or you can also notice an increase in volume of our compound. It could also double in size if you're lucky. Most important thing is that if you're going to notice a fermentation, like some bubbles on the surface or an increase in size, if the fermentation happens in these 48, 72 hours, then we can jump to the next step that I'm going to explain in the next video that I'm going to show you next time. If the fermentation does not manifest by 72 hours, so if you don't see an increase in size, and if you don't see some bubbles appearing on the top or in the middle right here, then don't worry. In that case, we have to repeat the same process. So what we're going to do in that case, we're going to remove 50 grams of this compound, and we're going to replace it with 25 grams of flour and 25 grams of water. This is going to sound familiar to you because it's almost like feeding it. It's a sort of a feeding that we're going to do to our sourdough. So I'm going to see you in 48, maximum 72 hours, so we can proceed to the next step. So let's see if my sourdough will pass the test, and if this compound will double in size or will activate the fermentation. The important thing is that if we don't manage, so if my sourdough doesn't manage to have any sign of fermentation, it's actually going to be all good, because I will have the excuse to show you the extra process of removing 50 grams of compound and mixing and replacing it with 25 grams of flour and 25 grams of water. So I will see you in 48 or 72 hours. It depends on the activity of the compound that I just created. If you find this video useful, or if you have any questions related to the entire process that I started explaining yesterday, feel free to reach out on my Instagram account. And if you like what you see, if you like the Sourdough Masterclass so far, feel free to drop a like and subscribe to my channel.